This is Reimagining Higher Education, your go-to podcast with remarkable education leaders sharing personal stories from their experience in and around the sector, including reflection and hope for progress in the sector. With your host, Professor Judyth Sachs, former PVC Learning and Teaching at the University of Sydney, Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Provost at Macquarie University, and Special Advisor in Higher Education at KPMG, and now Chief Academic Officer at Studiosity. Welcome.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce the President of University of Lynchburg, Professor Alison Morrison-Shetlar. Alison, you've had an extraordinary career. You've been the first woman president at University of Lynchburg. You're the 11th president at Lynchburg. But before you got to Lynchburg, you've had a very interesting career. So could you just introduce yourself and tell us or tell me about how Alison got to be where she is now?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, first of all, for the invitation to speak with you. Always great to speak to someone who's been in some of the shoes that I have been in before. So I appreciate that this possibility to have a conversation with you all. So I'm a biologist by training. And way back in the day, I went to Dundee College of Technology, at that point in time, now Abertay University. I wanted to be a lab technician because I'm a huge introvert. And to be, in a lab, just doing what I wanted to do was just absolutely fabulous for me. I was so excited to do that. And when I was interviewed, as happened in those days in Scotland, I was asked if I could do a chemistry O-level, then I could actually do a Bachelor of Science instead of a higher national diploma. And of course I thought, oh, well, okay, that's fine. I can do that. And that's sort of been the story of my life. People have seen things in me that I didn't see in myself. And as a result, doors have opened for me in ways that have been quite amazing. So I did do my Bachelor of Science in Biology and Chemistry, and did my honours, so fourth year in Scotland. And then I went into industry to be in a lab, not to speak to anybody. I did that for 6 months, and I hated every minute of it because it was a contract lab, which meant you started a project, but if your client didn't, like what was going on or didn't want to pursue that further, then it just stopped, which meant I never finished anything, or I felt like I never finished anything. And so 6 months into working in Edinburgh at a lab there, I got a phone call from my alma mater, Dundee College of Technology at the time, and they said, we're starting a doctoral program. Would you like to come? Now, I should back up a little bit because I loved my time doing my bachelor's degree. I really loved it. I played basketball, did all sorts of other things. First 2 years weren't really focused too much on the academic side of things, but I realized that I needed to do something and focus. And I also overheard a faculty member who said to me at the time, his name is Dr. Cargill, he's no longer with us, unfortunately, and he was talking to someone else, and he said, Alison's a lovely person, and I'm sure she'll do great, but I'm really worried about whether she'll be able to complete her bachelor's. And I overheard that conversation. And, when I got my doctorate, also at Dundee College of Technology, Dr. Cargill was one who hooded me. And I will always be grateful for him for giving me that little kick that I needed to be able to do this. So I finished my bachelor's second in my class, which was pretty impressive for somebody who wasn't really academically oriented for the first 2 years at least, but I really got into it in my second 2 years. And then I'd say they called me back to do a PhD. Never thought of doing a PhD. I'm the first in my family to go to college, along with my sister, a first generation to go to college, and just never thought about it. But again, it was that opening of doors. Somebody thought, yeah, we should bring Alison back and to do her doctorate. So I had money for 3 years. And so I did my doctorate in 3 years, because in Britain, as you may know, that you don't do classwork or coursework like you do in the States. You just go straight into your research. And so I had money for 3 years. I did research for 2.5 years, and I wrote for half a year and got my doctorate. And that was it, right? I was on that pathway to being in higher education in some way, shape, or form, and mine was primarily research. So I went to London, worked for 3 years in London at the Kennedy Institute of Rheumatology, doing skin cell differentiation, and learned a lot of techniques, immunology, biochemistry, physiology, all of those great things. But I really learned cell culture because we used to make, petri dishes of skin cells and look at how they functioned. The early stages of skin grafting, I suppose, for burns patients. And again, that was a great opportunity. I loved every minute, lived in London for 3 years and went to every theater program that I could go to and every musical program I could go to, and just loved absolutely every moment of it. And then I was lucky enough to give a presentation in Heidelberg, and that presentation resulted, this will make you laugh a little bit, resulted in people coming up to me and saying, I really like the work that you're doing, tell me more about it. And I was literally in a bar when somebody came up to me and said, we love the techniques that you're using. We would like to learn those techniques. I'd like you to meet, my supervisor. And so I met Doug Scott at that point in time. And he said, how would you like to come out to the Max Planck Institute in Germany, in Dortmund, Germany, and do research there? You can learn, you can teach us the techniques, and then we can help you in whatever you want to learn. And so I was interested in going into molecular biology. So again, it was somebody saw something in me and thought, okay, let's ask Alison if she'll go. So literally about 4 months later, I packed my suitcase, my backpack, and my sewing machine. You'll find out pretty soon that I rarely go anywhere without a sewing machine. And so I left and went to Germany. Didn't speak German. That was it. Again, just took the opportunity as it came. And I'll kind of fast forward a little bit here, but the story I tell a lot of people is that I tried very hard to meet a German boy so I could learn German. My husband and I have now been together 37 years this year, and he's from Kansas. So I met my husband, Bob, then to be husband, well. We got married in Germany, lived there together for 5 years. And then the wall came down, and Bob had finished his doctorate there, was doing a postdoc. I had a full-time, lifetime position at the Max Planck, which was kind of unusual for a non-German woman to be able to be in that position. But Bob just couldn't get a job. So we came to the States, and that's the reason that we came to the States. And then just been great opportunities ever since then. I was at Wesleyan University in Connecticut for 2 years before joining the lab that Edwards talked about, which was at Georgia Southern University. By that time, I was doing molecular biology and biochemistry and all those other good things, and really loved it. And each of these places that I've been, I've taught in some way, shape, or form, either pro bono at a university, or as I got into the States, I was part-time at Wesleyan University and then moved to Georgia Southern. I was there for 7 years before moving to University of Central Florida. Thought was going to be there maybe for 2 years, ended up staying 7 and having 3 different jobs. I went to University of Central Florida when it was 30,000 students. I left 8 years later with over 60,000 students, and I was the Dean of Undergraduate Studies and became the Vice Provost and Dean. So again, just got into places where people said, come and do this, Alison. And I was like, oh yeah, whatever, I'll go and do that. And it's always led to really great experiences. So that was a really great experience for me at UCF, and going from Georgia Southern to UCF, and then UCF to Elon University, which is a private institution in North Carolina. And then I went there as Dean of Arts and Sciences, and then I was called to Western Carolina University, where I went as provost. worked very closely with the Chancellor, David Belcher, who hired me. Again, somewhat funny story. The VP for Advancement decided to leave. And David came into our cabinet meeting and said, I don't have time for this. Who's going to lead the advancement team? And all of my colleagues looked down very studiously. And I was thinking, oh, well, that sounds kind of interesting. I'll do that. So I spent 9 months running advancement as well as being provost. Almost killed me, but it was a lot of fun. And that gave me the skills that I needed to then become the interim chancellor when David Belcher unfortunately passed away. I was helping him for the first 2 years of his illness, and then he went on long-term medical leave and then passed away. So I became interim chancellor, kind of liked the job. And then when I got called to University of Lynchburg, I went there as the president, and that was over 5 years ago, which is crazy how time flies. But every time I've moved, again, it's people who have nominated me for positions, saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And so my goal in life is to mentor as many people as I can, particularly young women, to do the kinds of things that I've done and be supported to be able to do it.
You've given us a wonderful chronology of your career, and it's remarkable, particularly for an introvert.
Right, yes, crazy.
But I've asked people to bring an object that represents their journey as a learner and a leader. Can you show us your object and tell us how it represents your journey as a learner and a leader?
Yep. So this is it's a wine bottle. Maybe that's probably not what you want to be saying first thing about your career, but it has little lights in it, and it's hard to see on camera, unfortunately. And it's charged by a USB port. And so for me, the colors of this, I think are really important as well. Again, a little hard to see, but there's blues and golds and all that kind of stuff in there. But the lights are what's the sort of important part of it, is because they're all connected. They all shine a little bit of light on the subject. And when this is fully on and you can see it, it's usually better to see it in the dark. It really does represent a lot of what I have felt like, the connections that you have, the lights that are the doors that open. So this means a lot to me, and I think a lot about it in terms of my own career. And I wouldn't be where I am today without the mentors that I had, the connections that I made, and also sort of, shining one's light a little bit. We're not very good at doing that, particularly if you're an introvert. But sometimes you have to, and if I can do that for somebody, I like to shine my little light on somebody who can then start to have their light and make those connections as well. So it means a lot to me.
And that sort of the light comes on and off means it's not always shining. It does
Nope.
have to recalibrate, and that's something that I'm getting a sense of in terms of your career. You stay in a place, and sometimes, when you've got not a permanent job, you're constantly thinking, what next? And so I think that's a wonderful metaphor for your career. Can you tell me a little bit more about Lynchburg? I've done some research in it, and it's very different from any university that I've worked in. So we only have one private university in Australia, or two private universities, one Catholic and one private university. So Lynchburg's a private university.
Yes, it is. And it's actually my third private university that I've worked at, because Wesleyan was a private university, very relatively small, 2,500 students total. And then I was at Elon University, and Elon is also private. That had about 6,000 students. And so University of Lynchburg for me was really a calling, because the values of the institution dovetails really well with my values. And again, a little bit of a side story here. The biggest thing for me when I was at Western Carolina universities, I really started to look and see, what kinds of presidencies I could go for. And I was very fortunate that I was a finalist for 4 presidencies. And I interviewed for all 4 positions in the space of 2.5 weeks. 2 were in Florida, 2 were in Virginia. And my husband and I didn't really want to go back to Florida, but I was more interested in the university than I was about location per se. And I think the values for all of the institutions were similar. But going to the University of Lynchburg, I stepped onto the campus actually the morning, the Sunday morning of the weekend of homecoming.
Mhm.
And I just saw so many people who were, joyous about their experience. They were alumni. The students were out and about. University of Lynchburg has red Adirondack chairs all over the place. It's actually sort of a little bit of an emblem for us. And so I sat down in a red Adirondack chair and phoned my husband and said, I hope they give me this job because this is where I can make a difference. And so it was the feel of the place. I interviewed, and the first thing I said, and I will never forget this, and actually just reminded my board of it at the last May board meeting. The first two sentences out of my mouth was, the University of Lynchburg is in the business of changing lives. And I can come here and help develop environments where everyone can meet their maximum potential. And it still gives me a little bit of a chill to say that because I was so certain that this was the right place for me. And so thankfully they did announce me as the incoming president on November of 2019. Well before we knew anything about COVID, well before all the other things that are happening in the world started to happen. I had a fabulous introduction to University of Lynchburg because I was able to go and be on campus 6 to 7 days a month from November all the way through to March, where everything closed down. And that really gave me the opportunity to get to know some of the people. But you know what it's like, you go into these big events with 100 people and you get to speak to everybody, but it's a hello, how are you? Tell me who you are, what you do, and then you move on to the next person. And so when I went to, because I wasn't yet president, I just went online, Zoom meetings such as this. And between March of 2020 and August 1st of 2020, I met about 1,500 people, either in small groups or in one-on-ones, very much like this, where I learned so much about the university. I learned so much about its history, what made it tick, how important it was in the community, which is huge. We're an anchor institution in Lynchburg. And so I learned a lot by meeting groups of people. We set them up. We call them red chair chats because of our red Adirondack chair. We had red chair chats, and I, met all the alumni from the theater department. I met all the religious studies folks. They'd all come online, and Bob and I would sit and just, 4 or 5 nights a week, we would just sit and, learn about what people felt about Lynchburg and its role in life. And again, the values are so strong for me, and that's what took me there. And that's why I continue to be there to make sure that we can sustain ourselves for the next 122 years, which is how long the university's been around.
You mentioned that your sort of opening gambit was to transform people's lives. Can you just unpack that a bit in terms of the student experience and what it's like to be a student at Lynchburg?
So number one thing for a student at Lynchburg is a sense of belonging, being able to feel like they are part of something that is bigger than they are, but then all together they're making this fabulous experience. The University of Lynchburg is in the book Colleges That Change Life. There's 40 of us in the States, and we actually have gatherings of those institutions. And that's what we do. Every time I talk to a student or an alum, particularly an alum, and it can be a 1958 alum, or it can be a 2024 alum, they say the same thing. This is my home. This is where I belong. And this is where I found what my passion was, what my purpose was, the people who had my back, and to be able to say, this is the place that made that happen. And so we call those the 4 Ps: place, people, passion, purpose. And that's that transformational experience. We've been very lucky that we bring students who are maybe not their top in their class or even, midway in their class, but we take C students and make them CEOs. We have first generation students who are Nobel Prize winners. These are the kinds of students that we attract at Lynchburg, those who just need a chance to be able to find themselves, a little like myself. I spent the first 2 years playing basketball and chasing boys and doing some chemistry and biology as I went along the way. But then, finding your place and finding your passion really, then it's easy to learn in that kind of environment. And so we want to make sure that we are giving students that cultural diversity knowledge that they need. So when I went to Lynchburg, we had 20 international students. We finished last semester, sort of 4 years into this, with 208 from all over the world. And those students have just brought such great ideas and thought, diversity of thought, to the institution and to our students, who are, of course, the reason that we do all of this. And so if we don't provide good environments where people can find themselves, then we're not doing our students the service that they deserve.
So it seems from what I'm hearing is that because it's a small institution, it's very personalized. People can connect and develop relationships, not only with other students, but with staff. Is that the chemistry of Lynchburg?
Yes, we call it the secret sauce. So I can't actually tell you. Oh, I know, only joking. But yes, we do personalized education. So we have approximately 1,600 undergraduates, close to 1,700 now, and about 1,000 graduate students. So it's an interesting mix. And a lot of our students, do their undergraduate and then go on and do their master's. And then depending on the program, could actually go on and do their doctorate at the university. So we have now 36 undergraduate programs, 18 master's programs, and 4 doctoral programs. We're not a professional school. We're a liberal arts based school, but we don't do PhDs. So we have Doctor of Medical Science. We have a Doctor of Physical Therapy, and of course our education EDD as well. And we've just started a new doctorate, which I'm so excited about, which is a doctorate in executive leadership in healthcare. So we provide that opportunity for students to find themselves, find their purpose, find their passion, and make sure that they get that personalized experience. We have great faculty and staff. They know the students. Nobody can have a bad day without somebody noticing,
Mm-hmm.
And we're also there to celebrate with them. We do a lot of celebration of our students, particularly if they're taking, doing undergraduate research and going off into conferences. We're a huge service learning institution. We give back to our community. We do internships in our community. So we're really embedded. As I said, we're an anchor institution for the city of Lynchburg and the region of Lynchburg. And so we want to make sure that our students are getting that hands-on, minds-on experience. So they're taking what they're learning in the classroom and applying it to something that is meaningful for our community. And quite often, a high percentage of times, our students who do internships or service learning in the community, they end up being offered jobs before they graduate. So they stay in the community as well. And that, I think I'm very proud of that. Again, leadership development is a huge part of what we do. Innovation and collaboration, huge part of what we do. And then making sure inclusive excellence is part of our DNA as well, is really important to us. And so our students are going out and doing great things, sometimes in the community and stay within the community. You can go to just about any major government, nonprofit, or business in Lynchburg, and you will find a Lynchburg grad at the top.
In the universities that I've worked in, they've been much larger than Lynchburg. In fact, we wouldn't have a university the size of Lynchburg. So it's both an advantage, but there are pitfalls in terms of size. And I remember when I was at Sydney University, the CFO said, "You never shrink to success." So how have you managed with sort of a limited resources and a small size? Do you have a gold mine in the backyard or something?
If only. And if you know of one, please let me know. We are very tuition and fees driven. We have, and basically that's our main income source. We're also residential. And so the majority of our undergraduate students and some of our graduate students actually live on campus or adjacent to campus. So we have to be very careful with how we, spend our resources. We want to make sure that things that we're investing in are going to enhance the student experience. And so, yeah, tuition and fees, number one. We've started to diversify. Obviously, auxiliaries such as room and board are very important to us. But I've also been looking at, again, this innovation and collaboration component of our strategic plan is really working well with us, particularly adjacent to our leadership development component. So we're actually providing leadership development for our students, faculty, and staff, but we're also providing it for our community because there's nothing out there that does that. And so we've started the Red Chair group, and they are, there's, well, how many? I was 10 maybe, that are Clifton Strengths coaches. And we are a Clifton Strengths campus. So that's the first thing that we do with our first year students, that we make sure that they understand their strengths and how they can utilize their strengths. That's really a big part of our institution. And now we're taking it out into the community. So we're working with our local hospital systems, or we're working with, business folks or nonprofits, because they don't have that resource. They sometimes don't have the money to send maybe one person to the Harvard Leadership Program, whereas we can go in and do 80 middle managers. And, obviously we get revenue from that. So we're looking for different revenue sources because we do not have that gold mine in the back. We depend a lot on our alumni, and I've been fortunate enough over the last 5 years to really re-engage a lot of alumni who were not as engaged as they needed to be. And that has helped us obviously financially, but we're really tuition based. And as I mentioned, I've worked at 3 privates. I've also worked at 4 publics. One was the University of Central Florida, and I said 38,000 when I went there, 60,000 when I left. To have that state support is really great, even though that amount of money is decreasing. In North Carolina, it's 80% of their funding comes from the state. As a private institution, you don't have that. And so it really is, I think actually, quite honestly, a lot of the state schools are having to work a little bit more like a private now because the state funding is decreasing so rapidly. And it seems to just get worse every year. So to know where your revenue is coming from and make sure that you're bringing the students in that you need is really what you have to do. And you can control it. You also then can control what you're spending your money on. But I also have always said that look at any of the accountancy in a university and you can see where their values are. And so we spend a lot of money in making sure that our student experience is excellent.
So in fact, student experience is at the core of what drives you both as a leader, but what sustains the institution.
When I joined Lynchburg, it was COVID, so that was the hard part. And we actually increased the number of students that we had during COVID because basically they didn't want to be sent home. So they stayed as long as they possibly could. But one of the things that I found, and I think it's fairly common, I know it's fairly common in private institutions and in some public institutions, is that we had just added things fairly liberally,
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to start this new program, so on and so forth. But what we're not very good at in higher education is getting rid of things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's two aspects to a student experience. There's the in-classroom aspect, and then there's what I call the holistic student, the out-of-classroom experience. And so as an institution, we hadn't really looked very carefully at where we were spending our money. And as a result, just 2.5 years ago, I had commissioned basically an assessment of all of our academic programs and all of our co-curricular programs. And I'll just focus on the academic side because this will give you some stats. I'm a biologist after all. I have to give you the data. 70% of our students, undergraduate students, were in 8 majors. And 95% of our students were in 21 majors, and we had 51 majors. And then the added part of this was that 25% of our faculty were teaching fewer than 5% of our students. That's just not a sustainable financial model.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, we had to make some very difficult decisions. And the last 2 years have been very, very hard because when you make decisions, as we did, we eliminated 12 undergraduate programs and 5 graduate programs. I had to eliminate 42 staff positions and 44 faculty positions. And that's impacting people's lives. And these are people in our community. And Lynchburg has, I think, about 80,000 people in the city. So it's not a big city by any stretch of the imagination. So you're affecting a lot of people's lives. But I couldn't not do something like that because we were putting money in places where students didn't want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so last year, May, we took all the data, all the analysis. And by the way, I included my board in those conversations so that they were fully aware of what was going on. And I think that's something to be talked about, maybe in a minute. But turning around to people and saying, as of this, end of this month, you're no longer employed. We did give severance, we gave health insurance, we did several things for our staff, but it's still hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then with the faculty, we put them on 1-year contract. So they had a year in which they would stay with us and do what was required, which is a teach out of the programs that we're eliminating. But there were so few students in these programs, we actually did the teach out in 1 year. And I think we thought we would have to do one program for 2 years, but it worked out that we didn't have to do that. We lost, the impact was about 102 students, and about 75 to 80 of them stayed and just moved into an adjacent program. And then we lost a few students. So it was a pretty tumultuous time. But what it did was it basically gave us about $4.9 million sort of back to invest in other things or to help us with our finances. And this is an institution that during COVID, and I was part of this decision, we paid everybody during COVID, even if they couldn't work, because we felt it was the right thing to do. But it also cost us a lot of money, right? We had to pay back the students' tuition and board from March until the end of the semester. That cost us another $2+ million. And then, unfortunately, when I came in the middle of a recruitment cycle, and we weren't recruiting the way we needed to do. So we brought in that first year, my first, August 1st, basically, was my first day. We brought in a very small class. So that cost us money. And so we got ourselves very quickly into a really difficult situation that resulted in us having to make some pretty difficult decisions.
But from what I'm hearing you say is that accountability, transparency, and courage is absolutely fundamental to your leadership.
Right, courage, I don't know. It certainly was a very difficult time. But again, if you keep the students as the main focus, They are the decision, if you're talking about decisions, you're talking about how you can help and support the students. And we've been able to do some amazing things in bringing the student experience front and foremost. And that the students have loved it. They felt like they were the center of the universe, right? The university is the University of Lynchburg. And so we saw student satisfaction increase. We saw all sorts of things happening, which was great. The flip side of it is in today's society, social media is just horrible. And so, again, I'm the leader of the institution. I take the knocks when there's accolades to be given, it needs to be given to the people who are doing the hard work. And I just firmly believe in that. I'm a servant leader. I've always been a servant leader. And one of my top Clifton strength is responsibility, which means I am determined to get things back on track. And I take that responsibility very seriously. But I also surround myself with great people. You can't do these things by yourself. And so I'm on my third iteration of my cabinet, which is crazy when you think about I've only been around for 5 years. But I inherited a group that wasn't the right group to be able to do what was needed. I brought some people in to do what was needed. And those are hard positions to be in. And often people don't stay very long once those decisions have been made. And so I brought in a fairly young group last year in May. They helped make some of these hard decisions, but they're actually the implementers. They're the innovators. They're the collaborators. They're making this new University of Lynchburg happen. So I'm very fortunate to have a really good team of people who are committed to helping the institution be successful. And as I say, we're seeing the results now. But it was pretty tough. And I was in social media. People were really not very kind. But my recommendation for anyone who is in these positions is to read Mel Robbins' book, Let Them, because that basically synthesizes you cannot control what people say, think, or do. You can only control your reaction to it. And so, again, surround yourself with good people and know that you're doing the right thing for the right reason. And our right reason is our students.
I've got 2 questions, and then there's a sort of a playful one at the end. You've done many graduations in your professional career, and as president, you have conversation. I can see you walking around campus talking to students. What advice do you give to students either at graduation or when you're sort of just talking to them on campus?
Well, I do walk around campus a lot. I'm very visible as a president. I think it's really important that the students see, and also that they know about me. They know I'm first generation because we have a first generation sort of group, and we have T-shirts that say I'm first. They know I'm from a low social economic background, modest background when my parents did very well later on in life, but it was not easy, let's put it that way. I depended on scholarships and grants and working during my education. And so when I talk to students, I talk about, there's going to be hard days, but there's always going to be brighter days past it. We want them to reach out to, of the 4 Ps, the people part is really important. And so I do red chair chats now in person on campus, which basically means I sit in the middle of the Dell or in the Drysdale Student Center in a chair and anyone can come up and talk to me. And I love those open office hours. And when they come and talk to me, it's often because they've got a concern. And so I ask them to help me, work out a solution to these concerns. Don't just come with a problem, come with a solution. And that I think has really helped because they don't walk up to me anymore and say, well, the dining's not, doing this, that, and the next thing. They come up and say, well, we've been thinking about it, President Alison, and do you think you could talk to the dining, or we could talk to the dining and have such and such happen? And the answer is yes, of course. And I go with them or I point them in the right direction. So I think it's giving them advice where they are to get them to where they want to be. But I only give advice if I'm asked.
Mhm.
I'm a very good listener. And if they come and say, we need you to do this or we need that, no, we'll do it together. Don't just pass that responsibility on to somebody and then walk away or complain that it's not being done. Be part of the solution. And that seems to work very well with the sort of students that we have at University of Lynchburg. They're really, really polite, wonderful people that feel like they belong and therefore they can raise their voices in ways that maybe they haven't been able to do in other parts of their life.
So, what advice would you give to the younger Alison? Because I said to you that you had courage and you sort of tittered. I reinforced that certainly got courage. But I think there are a whole lot of other C's as well. There's creativity, there's credibility. So what advice would you give to the Alison that I've met today and have been extraordinarily impressed with?
Well, thank you. I don't feel very impressive because I've got lots to do and things to achieve. But I think the advice I would give to any young woman coming into higher education is to find your passion and stick with it. And it will be hard. And there will be times where people will say to you, you shouldn't be doing that, or that's an awful thing to do. But if you have the conviction of knowing that you're doing the right things for the right reasons, then just power through. And again, find good mentors. And I've been so fortunate to have such great mentors, people who have, as I said, seen things in me that I didn't know that I had myself, but also had given me great advice. But I've also been I'm very transparent. I'm very forthright. I'm polite, of course, but fairly determined to do the things that I think are the right things to do. And I've had good mentors who have said, Alison, just calm down a little bit, and you need to do it this way and not that way. And it's worked well for me. So that's what I would do and say to the young Alison, or I mentor so many young women who are coming into higher education, and I just have been so impressed with their fortitude and their resolve. We talk about grit, we talk about responsibility. You've just got to sometimes do what you think is the right thing to do, and go for it. So that's the kind of advice I received, I think, along the way. And there have been some times where I haven't liked the advice that I've got, but I've listened and ultimately gone in that direction, and it was the right thing to do.
So my last question, and I acknowledge that you are on leave. So being on leave, you have hopefully a bit of head time. What are you reading at the moment?
Well, I mentioned earlier Mel Robbins' Let Them, which has really helped me, particularly through the last year, where I was getting a lot of negativity. I'm a Bowman and Deal person.
Me too.
And I've actually been reading and following Bowman and Deal since 1997 of all times. And it has really helped me think about, the structure of what I'm trying to do, the human resources of what I'm trying to do, the political perspective, and then the symbolic perspective of that. And so I think I'm on, what are we on, the 8th or 9th edition of Bowman and Deal. And I just, I've done book readings with that book, whether it's one-on-one as I'm mentoring somebody or with my cabinet. And it really has helped me, again, think about any problem from those 4 frames, and really helped me think again strategically, which is really important. So that's the other one that I'm reading. And then Who Moved My Cheese has been a great one for me, and a great one for, again, my young professionals, because we've made a lot of change at the University of Lynchburg over the last 5 years, a lot of change. And if you understand your reaction to that change, I think it helps you then be a much better leader and a much better servant leader to help any institution, whether it's a business or a nonprofit. So those are my 3 staples that I return to a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And they really help sustain me through some very difficult times.
Alison, thank you for making time to talk to me while you are out of the office, when you're on leave, recharging your batteries. I certainly feel recharged having talked to you this morning and your evening. So thank you. And I look forward to hearing of the continued success of President Alison.
Thank you very much, Judith. I very much appreciate it and very much enjoyed our conversation.
You have been listening to Studiosity's podcast, Reimagining Higher Education, candid conversations within higher education, sharing stories of leadership, change, and best practice in teaching and learning. Visit studiosity.com.